Welcome to another episode of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame podcast. I'm your host, Chris May. Each episode in this series, we take a stroll down memory lane with basketball stories and memories from someone who's been involved in the sport in our state. In this episode, current Boston Celtics head coach and former Butler Bulldogs head coach Brad Stevens gives us some time to talk about his childhood in Zionsville, his basketball idols, his childhood basketball rooting interests, his high school career and accomplishments, and a few notable moments in his life connected to basketball. He'll tell us about witnessing a famous chair tossing in Bloomington, being a ball boy with another Indiana basketball notable at a famous high school state championship game, and he'll tell us which iconic Indiana high school gymnasium he took his wife to on their first date. It's an episode filled with great memories and great stories here on the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame podcast. So, Coach, I would start with just asking you if there's any way to put into words what basketball has meant to your life, how it's impacted you to this point.
Oh, Chris, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I'd say it was my first love. It was something that, I wanted to spend every waking minute doing when I was playing. I'd say it framed a lot of my desires and ambitions as a young person of, what I wanted to accomplish as a player. It was an incredible motivator, taught me how to work, has taken me all over the world, and, has made me friendships that, are some of the most valuable things in my life. So, it'd be too hard to talk exactly or try to figure out or measure its exact impact, but it's been enormous, obviously, and very thankful to have had the sport and all that comes with it as part of our lives.
And I'm curious if you have a first basketball memory or early memories, whether that's playing, watching, going to games, anything along those lines.
Oh, I've got so many. Like, growing up in the state of Indiana, my dad played football at Indiana University. So, I was a huge IU fan. I mean, I was well into my basketball fandom prior to '87 when they won it. But, I don't remember much about the '81 season. I just remember there being a little bit of buzz in our house. I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. But I remember vividly those years after, and, at that point in time, my love for the game is growing. So I'm becoming more than just a casual IU basketball fan. I'm starting to watch it at the high school level, the pros. That was the Magic Bird era. Just like I can't even begin to single out one memory, but I have a ton even from that time. I'd say that the memory that stands out the most is just watching the '87 national championship game, which I probably watched 1,000 times. Had it on a VHS tape, and Smart hits the shot, and, Alford, knocks the ball away so they can't call timeout, and 1 second left, and then Smart steals the pass. I'd say that's probably the biggest memory I have as a kid at that early age, but I've got a lot of them.
And did you have a goal at your house in the neighborhood? What was that setup?
Yeah, I did. I probably should have mentioned too, I was at the game when Knight threw the chair. So that was maybe, I don't remember it quite as vividly as maybe I should, but we were definitely there. So that was a couple years before that. But I did.
Let's stop there. I mean, did that even occur to you as a significant moment when you're a kid there in the building when that happens?
My dad tells the story. So my dad somehow would get tickets, twice a year. We'd sit relatively in the same spot. I don't know if it was somebody's season tickets or whatever the case may be, but they were, 40 or 50 rows up right behind the IU bench in that second level. And so, Knight throws a chair, and Dad said he's looking like at me like, oh, what am I going to tell my, 8-year-old right now, about this when I get in the car? And he said he looks over at me, and I'm like egging it on and pumping my fist and think it's the coolest thing ever. So I guess I was just right in the middle of my fandom. But yeah, I did have a hoop. It was put in my driveway on my 8th birthday. The bus stop was a ways away from our house, and I had to walk, kind of over a hill before I got sight of the house. And I remember getting to the top of the hill and seeing the hoop from afar. And I remember sprinting the rest of the way. And, we wore that thing out. There are a lot of great memories in my driveway playing basketball with my friends in Zionsville, but also, a bunch of my AU teammates that would come over and spend the weekend or whatever. We had a lot of great games on that court.
So did your court become the neighborhood spot to play?
It did until one of my high school teammates, Brandon Monk, who now lives out here in Boston too. Until his dad built two goals on a slab of concrete, so he probably had a 40-foot full court or 50-foot full court. That's when that made our court fall into at least second place. But man, shot a lot of baskets. Had a flat driveway, which was nice. Which any piece of real estate I've looked for since, that's like the number one criteria is make sure the driveway can be flattened so that you can shoot a little hoop.
Those are priorities right there.
That's right. That's right.
An interesting question I've asked everybody in this series is who you emulated, who you wanted to be when you're shooting in the driveway, practicing the game-winning shot.
Yeah.
Were you a specific player?
I mean, like every other kid in elementary school in that era, I guess the Purdue fans might have been Troy Lewis, but I was trying to be Alford, running off screens and shooting, kind of envisioned, or dreamed about being like that. And then, I was one of the people that was probably mad at the Pacers for passing on him, but no offense to Steve, he was quickly replaced by Reggie Miller after I got a chance to watch Reggie, and I wore number 31 in high school because, I thought Reggie was one of the most fun guys to watch of that generation. And, I love the way that the way that he shot the ball. I love the way he ran off screens. I loved his shot amnesia. It didn't matter if he missed his last one. He would, he just shot the next one with the utmost swagger and confidence. And so I'd say that those two guys were who I wanted to be as I was, running off chairs, with brooms attached to them in the driveway.
And I'm curious, before you get to high school age, what was your experience with high school basketball? Was your father taking you to games? Was that a part of your life?
Yeah, when we first moved to Indiana, a couple of years later, my uncle was a doctor in Plymouth. And so in '83, I think it was, when Plymouth won the state high school championship with Skiles and Phil Wendell, who played at DePaul. I remember that being a major point of discussion. I don't remember if we went to the game. Certainly remember talking a lot about the game. But yeah, we would go to games. Obviously, Zionsville, we had an old gym that ended up getting torn down in 2000. As they built a new high school and built a new gym inside of it. But it was one of those great old Indiana basketball venues. And so we'd go to a ton of games there, Zionsville games, but we would also go around and watch different people that we knew or had a connection with, or maybe had read about up to that time. When I was an eighth grader, we had a family that we were friendly with who had a son on Buff with Alan Henderson that went to the state finals. And I actually ended up being a ball boy with Michael Lewis, whose grandpa, Gene Cato, was the head of the IHSAA. Michael and I were AAU teammates. Michael went on to be a great player at IU, and we worked together at Butler. Now he's at UCLA. But we were ball boys for that state championship game between Alan Henderson and Glenn Robinson. And yeah, I'd watched Buff play 1,000 times and was like, man, they're awesome, and Alan's awesome. But I mean, I'll never forget how good Glenn and Gary Roosevelt were that day. And man, I thought after that game that I'd never see a better high school player than Glenn Robinson. And I also thought, man, if I'm going into high school next year, this is a little bit tougher with these guys on the court than I can imagine I'm ready for.
And that game also took place in the Hoosier Dome. The
It did.
expanse of that building and the enormity of those players in that team, I'm sure, left an impression.
The second year that the state championship was in the Hoosier Dome. The year before was Damon Bailey, or maybe it was a couple years before was Damon Bailey. And obviously they moved that to maximize his fame, and they knew they could fill that place. But unbelievable environment. I remember Whitco was in it with Steve Nicodemus, Terre Haute South with Brian Evans and Hart. So there were a lot of players on the floor that day, and Michael and I got a front seat on the stanchion at the end of the court.
Incredible. That's incredible. You mentioned Damon Bailey. Did you see him either in person or on TV? Was that much of an influence on you at your age?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I would say Damon. Um, the mystique of Damon Bailey was as much of an influence as anything else. And then I, like everyone else, would watch him every time he was on TV, and would watch, the news if the news went and covered his game, which they often did. And, the idea that Coach Knight had, wanted an eighth grader to join his team just was mind boggling, but also inspiring, right? And so, yeah, I watched Damon all the way through. I played summer basketball most summers of my childhood and high school careers with Municipal Gardens, which was the same group that Damon had played for. So we actually got to be a part of a barnstorming tour one summer that followed, or that played halftime of their games. And then, I was a big fan of Damon growing up, and big fan of his at IU's.
I'd like to go to your high school years. You attended Zionsville High School, as everybody's well familiar. You mentioned being an eighth grader, seeing Glenn Robinson, Alan Henderson, and that spectacular show. What was your freshman year like, your expectations, your introduction to high school basketball?
Well, I was, first of all, it was really, I had grown up. By then, I was, part of the dream was to play basketball in the community I grew up in at Zionsville. We hadn't been great, and but we had a lot of there was a lot of expectation for really good things to come. And we had a we had a good class. The class ahead of me was good. The class ahead of me had a Division I player. He was one of my best friends, Brian Flickinger, who played at LaSalle. And so, there was a lot of excitement from my end. And, I always look back on that freshman year of high school as that was the time you're most stretched as a player, because you're just physically overwhelmed in a lot of ways. The seniors and juniors have already accomplished things and are just physically more ready to compete and perform at the level that you ultimately want to get to. But I was able to play a lot, but we had great, seniors that, accepted me and, put their arms around me instead of, pushed me away or saw me as a threat. And so I really appreciated that. And we ended up around 500 and lost in the sectional championship game. But, a lot of great memories from all those years, but that year especially. And I'm going back to it a little more now because I've got a son who's getting ready to be a freshman next year. And, we're out in the driveway every day. And I keep telling him, like, you know, the physicality is something that we can't prepare you for in a 5-on-5 game when you really get into the high school game, and how much more it matters to those kids whose careers are potentially winding down.
As your high school career goes on, what stands out to me is your senior year, your team wins the sectional championship, which, again, we're in one class. And you had just mentioned your Zionsville had not had a lot of success in previous years. That was the first sectional, I think, in 9 or 10 years. So talk me through your high school career, the experience of winning that sectional championship as a senior. And I think I've seen you quoted as saying your junior year losing the sectional was a great frustration of yours.
Well, we lost all 3 years prior to that was a great frustration. I'd say, you know, I think you remember the game. Unfortunately, when you're in sports, and especially when you get into coaching, you remember the losses, and they are so much more impactful for whatever reason, or so much more memorable because I guess the idea that you regret the outcome. You don't always regret the performance because sometimes you do all that you can and you just come up a little bit short. But my sophomore year, we lost the sectional championship for the second straight year to Lebanon. It was on their home court. It was the second straight year in a row they had beaten us, but we had a 12-point lead or 13-point lead, late in the third, early in the fourth, and I turned it over a couple times. We just didn't get the job done, and that was probably the hardest loss of my playing life. And if I had to say in my whole life, I'd say, I realized I lost, as part of a national championship game where we, lost or a couple of national championship games and, Eastern Conference finals and everything like that. But it's just different when you're a player. And, I felt like I had let us down. And so that was a real driving force for me. That Lebanon hit a shot at the buzzer on a baseline out of bounds play to win, a little 16-footer. And the next year we lost again in the first round, and we weren't quite as talented my senior year as before because we lost a couple of good players, but we ended up the season around 500. But then just kind of got hot in the sectional and found a way to win. And I'd say that as a player, I never felt better than probably that week, those couple of weeks, and never felt more motivated because of the pain that we had lived before.
And in the process of winning the sectional championship your senior season, little known fact here, you led the state in scoring for sectionals. You averaged 32, 33, 34 points a game for sectionals?
I don't know if it was that much. I don't know what the total number was. I remember in the first, I think it was the first half, maybe the third quarter of the Tuesday night game against Southmont, who had a really good coach, Roger Fleetwood, who ended up coaching down in Georgia for a while and ended up coaching Avery Jukes when he was in high school at South Gwinnett High School. But my coach pulled me aside and said, "You pass up another shot, you're just going to regret this, for the rest of your time." And he said it in a more colorful way. I loved my high school coach, Dave Salmon. He may have dropped a couple of F-bombs in there, and the message was clear. I probably wasn't going to pass much the rest of the week. so I heard him loud and clear. I heard the instructions that every kid playing basketball wants to hear. And so I let it fly, and it was a fun memory. We ran into a juggernaut the next week in Brownsburg, lost at Case Arena in Frankfurt in the regional to a really good Brownsburg team with Indiana All-Star Eric Riggs and a bunch of guys who were really good high school players. A couple guys that went on to play college, Ben Lacey, Quinn Moore, and a really good coach and Steve Bruins. And so it was those were good memories, but it was a tough ending. Brownsburg beat us pretty good.
The ultimate green light. I mean, like you said, any kid, anybody playing basketball, especially if you're wearing jersey number 31, that's what you want to hear, right? Let it fly.
That's right. And when everybody looks at you funny, just look at your coach and say, "Ask him. He told me to."
A quick stroll down memory lane. I'm interested of any other outstanding players in your high school years, guys you played against, teams you played against, anybody else or any other teams that stand out.
I mean, so many. I just mentioned Eric. I played summer basketball again with Municipal Gardens most of the time, but I played with Bloomington Red, which is, probably before Indiana Elite, but was a Bloomington-based team. I played with them 1 year. You're a Newcastle guy. I played with Scotty Miller and Kyle Huckabee. Kyle Huckabee was a great player. Still one of the all-time leading scorers at Newcastle. Played AAU with Michael Lewis and Jack Owens, the head coach at Miami of Ohio. And I thought Damon Frierson was the best player that I played with all the way through. I just thought that his feel for the game, his understanding of the game, his poise, his demeanor, he was such a quiet, soft-spoken guy that I think sometimes people underestimated how special he was, even all the way through his college career. You know, he's a 4-year starter at Miami on some of Miami's best teams. Played with James Patterson, Courtney James with with Bloomington Red, Carson Cunningham, who played at Purdue and now the head coach at University of Incarnate Word. You know, those guys that I named were all better than me. Mike Renfro the head coach at Beach Grove now. Those guys were all better than me, and you know, but I love being around them. I love competing with them. We spent a lot of weekends together, and you know, when our season was over in high school, I would go watch whoever was left out of all those guys, and you know, follow them as closely as possible.
Recruiting is vastly different, I suppose, from when you graduated high school. Nowadays, it is different.
Yeah.
You attend DePaul University in Greencastle, Division III athletics. Did you have other options? Was it a slam dunk you were going to go there all the way? How did that process play out?
Yeah, you know what's funny, Chris, is I was like everybody else at that age and stage. I thought I could play at a higher level than I was being recruited to. I thought I could contribute. And then when I became a recruiter at Butler, I'll never forget saying to myself, "Oh my God, there are 1,000 Brad Stevenses out here." There's a lot of guys like me that don't really separate themselves, that aren't great athletes and don't really move the needle. And I think one of the things and I've tried to explain this to parents as they're going through the recruiting process, even now that I've moved on to Boston, people will ask me like, what should we be looking at? How should we be going about this process? Listen, the best ones will separate themselves. And as a recruiter, you're not looking for the people that can just hold down the fort. You're looking for people that can change the game. And I think that that's the biggest difference. And, there's a lot of kids that could play at a lot of places, but I learned as a recruiter why I was a Division III player. And I think it became crystal clear. I had one opportunity to go, a late Division I offer. It was at Mercer in Georgia. I remember walking through campus and talking a lot to Tony Etchison, who tragically passed away this year. Earlier on this year, he was down there, and I think he was a redshirt senior to be. And Bill Hodges, who was a Zionsville grad, and also the coach at Indiana State when they went to the final game with Larry Bird, was finishing up his career down there. And Jim Rosensteel, who was a legendary coach at Lebanon, had called Bill and said, "Hey, this guy might be worth your look," after those sectional games. And Bill offered me a scholarship kind of at the last minute, but I was too much of a homebody probably to leave. So everything else I was looking at was Division III, and DePaul offered the best for me mix of what I was looking for academically. I got to be a part of a program that was heavily focused on internships and experiential learning, which at the time wasn't as big of a deal as it is now today. And so I'd say that decision was made more on realizing that if you're a Division III player, it's probably not what you're going to do for a living. And so you better make a decision based on, the academic side of things.
As a measure of how much basketball means to someone's life, I think you passed the test on this alone. I believe you took your now wife, Tracy, on your first date to a high school basketball game. Was it at the Wigwam in Anderson?
At the Wigwam. It was, I think it was so we started dating in December of 96. And so it must have been right after we got out of finals. We went to the Wigwam and watched North Central play at Anderson. Anderson had Eric Bush. I believe it was one of the younger years of Jason Gardner at North Central. As you can imagine, it was a super game. It was a super close game. I think Anderson won at the end, but what else are you going to do when finals are over? It's not, we might go out to eat, do something like that, but you might as well go to a game. So it's funny, of our dates when we were in college, we'd hop in the car and we drove to the Wigwam. We went to watch Zionsville play in Case Arena. We went to Zionsville to the old varsity gym and watch a game. So yeah, we did a lot of gym hopping, and it was an appropriate first date. We have a beautiful picture of the wigwam in our house to, commemorate that.
You found the right woman. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah.
When you suggested or told her you were going to the wigwam, was there any sort of pushback or you're crazy, or did she know what she was getting into?
I don't know. I don't think that either of us knew what we were getting into with regard to our future lifestyle. I thought we were just going to enjoy, getting out of Greencastle and taking a long ride and going up to a high school basketball game. But yeah, I don't know that it was definitely a premonition of things to come, right? With all of the gyms that we've been in over all the years. I heard somebody one time say their biggest regret in coaching was not taking a picture of every gym that they had recruited in or played in or coached in or done a walkthrough in. And boy, I would second that. I mean, I've been in some great ones, and the wigwam's way up there.
So, as you start your coaching career, the story is fairly well known that you have a position at Eli Lilly. You give that up for an unpaid position at Butler. I'm curious, just in the thought process that you're going through, as far as what motivates you or ultimately lets you pull the trigger on that move, which is going to change the trajectory of your life, obviously.
Yeah. Well, so the two things that stand out that I still think back to this day. In fact, I just talked to a bunch of middle school coaches in Massachusetts today that I got into coaching because I wanted to be a part of a team and I wanted a scoreboard because I missed that when I was sitting at Lilly. I realized at Lilly you're competing with other drug companies and you're also working together in your small groups to try to achieve something, but it just didn't feel the same as being at practice and having that scoreboard and feeling the game and being a part of the game and all that comes with that. And I think the other part that maybe was a little bit more of a motivating factor, Chris, than I had ever really realized was, I'd grown up a huge fan of Indiana. And as a result, a huge fan of college basketball and just enamored with the NCAA tournament. And, I didn't get a chance to experience that as a player at the Division III level. And I think one of my drivers of getting in was to get a chance to maybe one day be a part of an NCAA tournament game. And so I'd say that those things really stood out. I had worked camps all the way through my college years. One of my friends that I had kind of tagged along with or met or spent time with was Thad Matta, who had just been named the head coach at Butler. And so he offered me a chance to join him and volunteer and take a hefty pay cut, maybe take some classes so that I could be a graduate manager and get out on the court. And, I'll never forget, I left Lilly one afternoon and went over there and they were having a staff meeting and Thad invited me in and I walked in there and listened to those guys talk about their recruiting priorities, what they wanted to emphasize on offense and defense for the following year. And I walked out of the meeting, said, I don't know anything about coaching basketball. And, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, here I am. I've played this game my whole life. I think I've studied it more than anybody ever has. And I don't know the first thing about coaching it. And so it was a great lesson that I better put my nose down and work. And I was surrounded by such special coaches. That first staff, I got a chance to work. I eventually got hired on, but I got a chance to work with Thad and John Gross, the head coach at Akron now, and Todd Lickliter, the head coach at Evansville. Mike Marshall, who had played at Butler, is just an amazing first staff to be a part of. And so I'd say that foundation for my coaching career is the single biggest reason why, I'm where I am, or the people that I was surrounded by.
I've always wondered this. You basically just answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It sounds foolish to ask a guy now who's coached in the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals and been into national championship games, but you said it was that NCAA tournament experience, the college attachment. Would you have ever considered being a high school coach or working your way up the ladder, or was it college or bust?
So when I was a junior in college, I did my internship as part of the program that I had talked about earlier at DePaul at Eli Lilly, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I accepted a job after that because they offered it, and because when you're offered a job at Eli Lilly and you're in college and you've kind of got that, then you do that. But I realized my senior year that if I'm going to change professions, it'll probably be to try to pursue coaching. So I actually took two education classes in my last year at DePaul to get a head start if I needed to go back to school to get my education degree so that I could be a teacher and a coach. I always thought during my time at Butler that I would ultimately probably become a Division III head coach when I got the opportunity. But I did not ever dream that I would become the head coach at Butler. But I had always thought it was going to be more of the route that I had taken and the route that I had played in, and let alone here with the Celtics.
And to wrap things up, I think it's interesting that still relatively early in your career, you've already developed a pretty cool coaching tree. A number of guys who played for you at Butler are out doing their own thing now, and I'm just interested in your perspective of being the patriarch of a coaching tree now.
Well, I don't know about that. I guess the cool thing is the other thing that I didn't mention was when I got to Butler, on that team, you had Brandon Miller, who, became a coach, great player at Newcastle and at Butler, at Southwest Missouri State for you. You had LaBelle Jordan, now the head coach at Butler. You had Darnell Archie, another Newcastle guy who now is the head coach at the University of Mobile, NAIA school in Southern Alabama. You've got Joel Cornett, who was one of the great leaders of any groups you could ever be a part of. Thomas Jackson, who's been in coaching in the G League. So you just had so many players and people that were so invested in the game. And I thought one of the cool things about Butler is we had such a great education department at Butler that if our guys didn't come and have a desire to major in business, which a lot of our guys did, then a lot of them went into education so that they could teach and coach. And so we have a number of high school coaches. We have, a number of college assistant coaches. We have, Ron Nord is a assistant coach with the Charlotte Hornets. And I think one of the things I'm really looking forward to in life is when, my time passes and I'll get a chance to go watch them coach all their teams, because I really appreciate it. In fact, you'll like this. So my son is an eighth grader, and I actually had Zach Hahn, who's the head coach at Center Grove, and Sean Van Zant, who's the head coach down in Tampa, head high school varsity coach down in Tampa. I had those two get online with him on a Zoom call earlier during this coronavirus hiatus and really talk about like what their expectations of a freshman are. Like when they walk in the gym, how they should act, what's a turnoff, what do they like, what do they look for, what do they need to be prepared for. And I so appreciate those guys sharing that time. And it was so, you can imagine, Chris, how special it was to hear their voices, like telling Brady how to be and knowing where they've come from and how much of an impact they've had on our family and our coaching and, the whole Butler experience. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, I think that those are what makes us special. Obviously, it's the relationships. I think the players that you've coached, the coaches that you've worked with, and in a weird way, the coaches that you competed against, are the relationships that you probably cherish the most along the way.
So cool. You've been very generous with your time. One last question. I would have to ask it. We're recording, obviously, in the middle of the COVID-19 outbreak. What has this quarantine been like for an NBA head coach? I think you played in Indianapolis. Was that your last game before the NBA shut things down? What's this been like? And Celtics fans want to know, is the season going to resume? And what are the Celtics going to look like once you get back to the court?
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, the last public thing I was a part of was the game at Bankers Life Fieldhouse that Tuesday night. Actually went out to eat with Phil Eisenbarger, both of our good friends that was my coach in high school, and one of the best people I know that night. And right after the game, and then we flew to Milwaukee, and the next night the NBA suspended its season and shut down. And in a lot of ways, that was a trigger for a lot of the U.S. And a lot of the state governments, and certainly national government, and all that's followed. So yeah, it's obviously been really unique. We're here in a very much been a hot spot of the coronavirus in New England, in Massachusetts, and we're lucky. Our frontline workers are amazing. Incredible healthcare here, incredible people on our front lines, and so we're fortunate that we've been safe and healthy, and we're doing the easy part, and that's just staying at home. But our team is, we get together periodically, and we've really emphasized, Chris, that throughout all this is a great opportunity to improve and be intrinsically motivated people. Whenever we're asked to resume, will shine. And so, we've talked a lot about maintaining your strength, maintaining your skill to the best that you can. Some guys have access to baskets, some don't. But really focusing on our conditioning, and trying to stay a week away from your best shape. We're all on call. If we get that call that the NBA is going to resume and practice is going to resume, and we all get sent to, wherever, to be quarantined and play games with no fans, then we're going to do it, because, I think we're all excited for the chance to play the game we love and to be back together and to provide a distraction for people who are looking for a distraction.
Coach, can't thank you enough for your time. Great memories, great wisdom, and a great part of Indiana basketball history. Thank you so much.
Fun stuff. Thanks for having me, Chris.
We remind you to follow the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame online on social media with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Also, our website, hoopshall.com, for information on inductees, our upcoming events, our online gift shop, and so much more. As a reminder, share these episodes on your social media accounts. Make sure you subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other locations that podcasts are released. And we encourage you to join us again next time for another edition of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame podcast.